Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Javier Villegas, and welcome to Data Platform Summit 2020. This excellent virtual event that I'm proud of being part of. Thank you for the whole organizing team to invite me and to give me the opportunity to present. It's an honor to me to be here. Just an FYI, while you see this presentation, I will be available in the chat window, just answering all the questions that you may have about this presentation. So let's start. Today we're going to be talking about SQL Server monitoring and troubleshooting using community tools which are free. Right? So let's start digging into this topic today. Okay, my name is Javier Villegas. I work as IT director at Mediterranean Shipping Company for the last 15 years. I'm in charge of the data and BI areas in my company. My specialization is SQL Server administration, performance tuning, high availability, troubleshooting, and these kind of things. I'm Microsoft MVP in the data platform category since 2016, and I'm also Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also a technical speaker, which I love to be part of any kind of event in where I can participate to share and discuss about technology. This is one of my passions. Additionally, I'm a member of the PAS community, and here in Argentina, I'm a member of the local group. We have our own meetup, our own meetings, and well, we run our community locally. In the left side of the panel, you will see my contact information, email, LinkedIn, Twitter, and my blog in case you want to connect with me about this presentation or any other thing you would like to talk about it. All right, just to start, it's good to put some basis, right? Something that I like to mention is that every data professional has its own set of tooling to do performance analysis and troubleshooting. The idea with this presentation is basically to know others that maybe you know them already or you don't, but the idea is to make this toolbox a little bit bigger so we have more options to apply these techniques and tools in different cases. So this is what we will try to cover, right? Know these additional tools and see when we can use them. Something that is also important to remark is that there is no tool, free or paid, that is able to magically fix bad code. So that is why I like to emphasize that we as data professionals, as DBAs, we need to spend some time with our devs team, just teaching them the best practices on how to write proper T-SQL code, right? This way, spending a couple of hours per week, per month, or just scheduling these training sessions will help us to avoid using all these kind of toolings when we have to, find out something in particular. So let's dig a little bit into the process. This is something that we cannot just one day come up and say, hey, I need to do troubleshooting, so let's start. No, this is a continuous process. This is something that we have to start, continue, and repeat, right? And how is that? First of all, we have to observe our environment. And with that, I mean that we should create our baseline. right? This is something that we should be doing every time, meaning that we should be able to store, first of all, collect and store different kind of metrics and counter from our environment when everything is running properly, right? So this way, when there is something that is not running correctly, we can easily take another picture of what's going on and compare it with this baseline, right? So the idea is to observe, get this baseline, and when we talk about baseline, we mention every kind of counters that we can add to this baseline. For example, CPU usage, memory usage, I/O, and metrics also related to SQL Server itself, like batch requests per second, compilations per second, logins, etc., etc. Right? So this way, when we do this comparison, when the system is not running properly versus our initial baseline, we're going to be finding easily where do we have the differences, and that's going to help us to understand what is the problem that we are suffering right now. And with that, we just go adjust the problem, or we fix the problem, right? Somehow, then we can discuss many techniques to do that. But then, after we fix the problem and the fix is in place, we repeat the whole schema, right? We continue observing, we take additional baseline, and then, when we see that we are under pressure again or with some sort of problem, we do the same. Okay, so here is part of the agenda, that the topic that we're going to be covering today. At the top part of the list, you will see that we're going to be covering some tools and techniques or technologies that are coming with Microsoft SQL Server, right? And then in the bottom part of the list, we will cover solutions that are developed, maintained, and distributed by a community expert. So let's start. We have Performance Monitor and Profiler. Probably these are the first two tools that every single DBA used when we had to do troubleshooting, right? These are great tools. We know that with Performance Monitor, we are able to see live the metrics and the counter of our Windows server, right? All the things that we mentioned before, CPU, memory, I/O, and SQL Server counters, and also store this information so we can collect, right, and build this baseline. With the profiler, we can do the same, right, within SQL Server. If we need to know what is happening, which are the statements that are running within our SQL Server, and with that knowing how long it takes, which is the amount of reads, writes, 10 dB usage, etc., we're going to have everything within profiler. Something that not everybody knows is that collecting this metric with Performance Monitor and with Profiler, then we can combine them easily, right? And with that have a matching. I mean, we have to have the file from Performance Monitor and the file from Profiler. They had to be taken, of course, at the same time, and with that we can compare and see in only one screen, in one, let's say, UI, the correlation between the counters in our system and the counters within SQL Server. We're going to see it in action later on. We also have Activity Monitor within SQL Server Management Studio, right? This is something that not too many people use, but it is available. And with that, we have this small dashboard in where we can see live CPU usage, memory usage, weights, and we can also see the active expensive queries and all the active sessions that we have in our SQL Server. Something that I like in Activity Monitor is that recently, with the introduction of this feature called Lightweight Query Profiling in SQL Server 2019, right, we can also see the estimated query progress within lightweight query profiling. And this is useful, especially for the cases in where, for example, let's say that you get into the office in the morning, right, and the management is expecting a report that runs overnight and normally takes 30 minutes or something like that, and by 8 a.m. they should have it in their desk. That particular day it never arrived, so we just open our workstation and we start doing this troubleshooting process, and we see that report is still running suddenly with no code change or with any kind of strange stuff. We know that it's still running, but there is something that we don't know till now, which is at which point of the execution that process is. If it is at the 10%, 50%, 90%, right? We don't know that, because if we know that, we can take better decisions, right? If we see that it passed a lot of hours and it's still in 10, 20%, well, we may need to take a decision. But if it is about 90, 95%, we know that if we wait a little bit more, we're going to get the results, and then we do the troubleshooting, right? Well, with this feature in SQL Server 2019 lightweight query profiling, we're going to get, right, the estimated query progress, and we're going to see this number within Activity Monitor. We're going to see it in action in a minute. We also have the Management Studio Performance Dashboard reports. These are reports that are based in SSRS, reporting services, right? RDL files, which come with Management Studio, right? I remember before, several years ago, you had to download the performance dashboard, then apply some objects to your instance, and then you was able to get and run this report. Now everything comes within Management Studio, so you don't need to download or apply anything. You're gonna get it, and you're gonna have those reports in front of you. Another important thing, I will say most probably the most important, is this set of dynamic management objects. These are read-only views and functions that SQL Server will expose to us and will provide us with a lot of information, which is mostly related to performance, statistic, usage, etc. And with those, with the result set of these views and functions, we can understand what is going on in SQL Server in that particular moment, or since the SQL Server was started. And there are certain categories. Here in the slide, I just mentioned a couple of them, like transaction, index, missing index, and query stats. But there are many others, like, for example, availability groups, replication, several other categories in where we have these DMVs and the in DMF. Something important to mention is that every single solution which is to do monitoring, right, even free or paid, are based on these dynamic management objects, right? Using this information and combining them, and then maybe putting a UI in front of it, right, is how these solutions work, right? 100% relying on these DMOs. So really important to know them. Again, there are many of them, right? So it's good to know some of them, and we will see them in action later on. We also have extended events. This is something that I like to mention because initially we spoke about Profiler, right? This tool that is coming since the very early versions of SQL Server, in where if you don't know the tool exactly, or if you are not careful using it, and if you are using Profiler on an environment that is having a problem right now, if you don't use it properly, you may be introducing additional problems to the ones that you are trying to capture, diagnostic, and fix, right? So you have to be very careful with Profiler. On the other hand, since SQL Server 2008, Microsoft has released this extended events, which is basically a light way to run these kind of traces, and just storing the output in many targets, like for example to the disk, to a XML file, and even internally into SQL Server. And then we have multiple ways to read the information and do our troubleshooting. We will see that we can do a ton of things with extended event. Even going a little bit further, you know that Microsoft is not investing in Profiler anymore. So we have the tool on the new SQL Server versions, but actually it hasn't changed since many years ago. In extended events, on the other hand, they keep investing, and every new feature that is introduced within SQL Server, there is an extended event that will cover that, and we're going to be able to run these traces. Here I am mentioning some component of extended events, right? So package, event, predicate, actions, and target. And when we see this in action later on, you will notice that it has certain correlation with what we all learn in Profiler, right? We have to understand how to write these extended event sessions and how to use them and consume it, but definitely a really powerful tool. And then we have the query plans, right? Within Management Studio, when we have to troubleshoot a particular plan, we can just run it from there, right? Get the plan, the actual or the estimated, and even the live query plan, right? And then we have the output in XML, in a graphical way, etc. And we do the troubleshooting to understand what's going on with that particular plan. We take the necessary actions to make it better, right? And with that, we're going to jump a little bit to the first external tool, right, which is SentryOne Plan Explorer. This is a tool which is free, and you can use it as a plugin for Management Studio, or an extension for Azure Data Studio. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and also as a standalone application. And when you create a query plan in Management Studio, you can pass it to Plan Explorer. You can even open a save execution plan that you already have and analyze it with this tool. This one is really powerful when you have to work with a big query plan, right? So in Management Studio, it's good to use it too, but it's a little bit more complex when the plan is quite big and maybe twisted or complex. With Plan Explorer, it's really easy to move through a query plan and do the troubleshooting. We also have Query Store, right? This Query Store feature was introduced back in SQL Server 2016, and I like to call it like the flight data recorder of our user databases, right? This is a feature that is disabled by default in SQL Server, but is enabled by default in Azure SQL, right? And what's the purpose of this query store flag data recorder? Basically, when we enable it per user database, what this is going to do is within the database is going to store all the runtime statistic, all the plan changes, and also the information about weights, right? So let's say you run a process, right, and you run it multiple times, right? For that particular process and also for all the processes against that user database, it will collect all the runtime information, how many times it's run, reads, writes, memory, 10 dB usage, etc., etc., and you will be able to aggregate and see minimum, maximum, etc. Eventually, if the plan for your process change over time for any reason, right? We know that there are multiple reasons that one plan can be changed. You're gonna see when the plan was changed, and eventually, if you want, you can manually force to use one of the previous plans, right? You can do this not for one process, but for all the processes running against your database, right? So you enable Query Store, and you will have within this dashboard in Management Studio the possibility of checking the information captured by Query Store. Here we have some examples of how we get the data from Query Store, right? For example, one particular process, how it was executed over time. Then we have this dashboard in where we can easily identify the top 25 resources consumed during the last hour in one particular database, and with that we sort it by, for example, average duration, like in this case, and we just go there and dig deeper to improve the performance and make it better. And this is the latest addition to Query Store, which was weight stat, right? This was introduced in SQL Server 2017. So let's jump to the demo a little bit, so we see some of these points that we cover in action and we understand them a little bit more. So here I have a virtual machine, and what we will do here is enable the option here at the top, include live query statistic, right? So this is a feature that we get in Management Studio, and what I'm going to do is I will just run one of the demo query that I have, right? So when I run it, it's preparing the live query statistic, and see what we have here at the top. Estimated query progress, 21% in this case. So we see the progress, we see the execution plan live, right? And here at the top and also here at the bottom, we see at which point the execution we are at right now. So quite important to understand where we are right now. I will cancel this one and I will execute another one. When I do this again, right, we see how our query is progressing over time. So again, we can estimate how long it's going to take to finish. We see at which point of the execution we are at. So this information will definitely provide us an opportunity to take better decisions, right? If we know that it's about to finish, we just wait a little bit more. Otherwise, we may do something else. So really nice feature. Something that Microsoft is doing this day, which to me is great. These wonderful features are also port it back to SQL Server 2016 and 17, right? So in 17 and 16 is not enabled by default. You have to enable a trace flag, and you will have the feature available, right? In 2019 is enabled by default. So this is really nice. But then you can tell me, okay, this is wonderful, but I don't run my stuff through Management Studio. I have my application server, my web server, which is running the workload against my my instance, my SQL instance. So how do I do that? So I will open here one script that I have, which basically what it does, it generates random workload against my user database, right? So it's just generating, doing select, insert, updates, deletes in my demo database. So I will minimize this for a minute. So from Management Studio, I will go here to my instance. I will do right click, and here I have Activity Monitor, right? So I will click on Activity Monitor. It's going to take a couple of seconds to populate the initial screen, right? And we're going to see CPU usage, weights information, I/O, batch requests, etc., etc. We're going to see all the processes, right? And here at the bottom we have this one, which is called active expensive queries, right? So all the queries that are heavy running in our system. So I can pick one. I do right click, right, and see what I have here. Show live execution plan. So when I hit on this, right, I see the plan live, and I also see the estimated query progress, right? So again, this is something that I wasn't running from Management Studio. It was running from my application server, and I see at which point of the execution we are at, right? So definitely something that will help us a lot, and it's helping us a lot already. So let's close this one, and I will also close my workload generator and the activity monitor. Then we talk about profiler and performance monitor, right? Here I have one session of performance monitor, just capturing, so we see the stuff live, what's going on right now, and we can also collect the data and save it to disk. On the other hand, I have profiler. So what I'm gonna do here is I will open a trace file which was generated a while ago with all the activity that I had in my user in my instance, right? So it just capture everything. It's going to take a moment to populate all the rows, but this is what was doing SQL Server back then. At the same time, I was running performance monitor, right, to collect the metrics and counters from my instance. Sorry, from my system, my Windows server. So now that profiler has finished, I will go here at the top and I have this option, import performance data. It will allow me to select the file that was generated with performance monitor, right? And here it's going to present to me all the counters that we have stored in that file, and I will select the ones I want, right? For example, in terms of processor, I will get processor time, then I will go to physical disk, I will choose idle time, and I want to get the idle time for all my disk. Right here I will select only total. Then for SQL related counters, I will get transaction per second for all the databases. Then I can get, for example, let's say logins per seconds, and I will get also batch requests per second, right? And then I will just load this. When we load this, see that now in Profiler, right, we get at the top the information that was captured through Profiler. But then we have the chart and the data in this result set, so we can see all the counters that we select. We see the whole information in here. So let's say that I go to the chart and I say, oh, here we had a peak. Let's see what happened there. So with the click of the mouse, I go there and I get at this point in time, right, what was happening here in SQL, and also the counters that were measured. Right? I can even select like a time frame and focus on that particular time frame. I go here and I see, and it's correlate what was happening within SQL and the host. Really, really useful. So let's close Profiler and perform a monitor now. And let's focus a little bit on extended events. So I will go and open my extended events. I should have it here, right? And I will go to the one that I call SQL errors. So let's uncomment this here. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I will create an extended event session on my instance, which basically will capture all these errors generated within the SQL instance, right? This is kind of useful for the cases in where, let's say, you are going live with an update version of your application, in where you have to deploy a bunch of new procedures, modify procedures, data model changes, etc. So this is good to have it running when you apply the new version, so you can easily and quickly capture if maybe there is one store procedure that requires more or additional parameters now than what it used to be, or if you have any syntax error or anything. So what I'm doing here, this is basically saving the output into a file. I will delete all the previous files and see here. We want to see create event session. I'm going to specify a name, XE SQL errors. Which kind of events do I want to capture? Well, I want to get SQL Server errors. Which actions? This you can consider in like the columns in Profiler, right? So I can get application name, host name, database ID, SQL text, and username. And so with that, you see which object with host name and which login is generating the error. And then you can specify like a predicate. So for example, I'm not interested in capturing these error numbers, because I know that I may have them, but I don't care at this point, right? And then finally, I specify the target. The target is where we are going to store the events generated by this session. So I will create the session, right? And then I will start it. So now it is started, and I will comment this again. So down here I have a script that basically what it does, it just go through that XML file that is being generated live with all the errors happening in the SQL Server instance, right? And it's parsing the output and generating this report. Right now there are no errors on my instance, so which is good. So now I will kind of generate some random errors. For example, I will do division by 0, right? So I will execute it multiple times. Then I will create and store procedure, which is basically also doing a division by 0 and also trying to do a select from a table that doesn't exist. I'm able to create a store procedure, right? And then I will execute it. And we see that it's generating this error. Maybe if this is happening through an application server, we don't catch this error. So then we run the script that is parsing the output again and see what we got. Here at the top, we have that we had 5 times the error division by 0, right? And we get even the statement that was generating the error, right? And then the second one is this one, invalid object name, which I call fake name, right? We also have the statement, right? And we also have the store procedure name. And if we go to the right, we also see that we have mean time. This mean time is the first time that the error was captured, max time, the error number, and then we have the application that generate the error, right? In this case it's Management Studio, and the host name. And also, if we go a little bit more, we also get the username, right? So we have all we need here. So again, and this is running constantly, it's quite light, right? So it's capturing all the errors that the instance is generating, right? So again, if I generate, let's say, syntax error, again, I can execute it multiple times, right? Then I execute my live parser, right? And here I capturing that I got 13 times this error, which was a syntax error. In this case, cannot find procedure, but it could be any kind of error. So really useful to consider it. I also have some other extended event sessions running on the servers that I manage, which are basically generating all the output of the deadlocks, right? So we get in XML format all the deadlocks happening on the instance, and also we can, what I'm doing is collecting all the statements and processes that are taking longer than a given number of minutes, 10 minutes, 60 minutes, depends on your needs, right? So really good to have them in mind and use in many cases. All right, so let's go back here. Okay, let's go to the presentation again. Okay. Well, here we have some of those, phrases that we get when we are in trouble, right? Hey DBAs, our application is slow. Why slow? It's taking forever. So do something, fix it, right? So well, all these techniques and tools will definitely help us to accomplish that. So let's start with the second part, which is actually the solutions developed and generated by members of the community. And the first one is definitely SP Who is Active, right? This is a project that was created many years ago by Adam Mechanic, right? Which is basically, again, using a combination of a bunch of dynamic management objects, right? And the output of this is basically a picture of what is happening on our instance in this particular moment. So let's say you get the phone call, you get the email or the ticket saying that your environment is not running properly, right? The first thing I do is take this picture, right, running SP Who's Active, to see what is happening in my instance in this moment, And with that, you can see all the statements that are running, for how long they've been running, maybe if they are involved in some sort of lock, right? So one session is holding many others, and you can get this picture of the status, and this is really useful diagnostic information, because with that you know what to start looking for, and start your troubleshooting process. But this is going to tell you what is happening, right? So SP who's active, again, you have the link over there, spwhosactive.com, and you can download and use it. I believe that is, I mean, this is not coming with SQL Server as I said, but this is kind of a tool that must come with SQL Server, and if it's not, we definitely need to know about it. Another important thing that we can do with SP who's active is that let's say that someone come to you early in the morning and say, hey, the instance was not running so well back at 3 a.m. Can you tell me what's going on? Well, at 3 a.m. I was sleeping, so I was not in front of my management studio running SP who's active. Well, there is a way to run SP who's active using a SQL Server agent job and save the output to a user table, right? So you can schedule it to run it every 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. That's depend on your needs. And we'll take this picture and we'll send the output to this user table, right? So then you can query the table. You're going to have an additional column which is going to give you the timestamp, so you can see what was happening exactly at 3 a.m. in the morning while you were sleeping. Right? You can use the SP who's active with no any parameters, and you will definitely have a rich output, all you need. But then you have the documentation in the web page, which is have all the details related to the parameters that you can use if you are looking for something specifically. Then many years ago, I also create one version of this SP who's active, my version, which I call SPDBA currently exec, which is also posted in GitHub, so you can download and use it and contribute it if you want, which is basically some sort of wrapper to SP who's active. Right? It's again based on dynamic management views and functions, and it's going to give you the same information but maybe present it on a different way, right? The main difference that I have, or the one that I like to call the main difference, is that if there is a block in your instance, right, it's going to present you with a separate result set with all the sessions, all the speed involved in the lock. Right? And then the additional results and with all the sessions active in the server. But again, SP who's active, SPDBA currently exec, is most probably the first thing you have to do when you get that phone call reporting that the environment is not running well. Then let's switch to the next solution, which is the one from Brent Ozar called First Responder Kit. This is basically a set of scripts, set of tools that we can use to diagnostic and troubleshoot our environment. And let's cover some of them. First of all, you have this SP Blitz. Right? With SP Blitz, what you do is you check your SQL Server health. Right? What this is going to do is basically run a process in against your instance, right? And it will come up with a report, right, with all the things that it found that it's maybe misconfigured, or with some sort of problems, or not following the best practices, right? And with that, it's going to present this result set, and it's going to be sorted by a priority, right? So if you have the priority 1, 2, 10, well, those are probably things that you may have to pay attention right now. And then if you have another kind of priority, maybe you can take a look later. For example, if you are not doing backups of your databases, if you don't have a recent DBCC check DB, all those things are gonna definitely come up at the top, right? But you can capture any kind of information related to the health. For example, you have databases in full recovery model and you are not taking transaction log backup. The log files are bigger than the data file. The TempDB or the system databases are on the C drive, and those kind of things, right? And this report will help you to understand what's going on. And one of the beauty, not only of SP Blitz but all the others, is that you also have a column in where there is a link to the documentation that you can follow in order to fix that particular problem, right? So it's presenting you the problem and it's helping you to solve it, right, with the proper documentation. Then you have SP Blitz first, and this is kind of similar to the other one, but it will tell you why the SQL Server is slow in this particular moment, right? Basically, maybe there are a lot of weights, and it will tell you which kind of weights you have, and will again point you to the documentation on how to fix them, or how to mitigate, or some workarounds, right? So definitely another great tool. There is also another one called SP Blitz Cache, which basically we go through all the planned cache in your instance, and it will do this deep analysis, right? And it will come up with all the stuff that you have in the cache, and it will report you with all the problems that it may found for a particular planned cache, right? Let's say the plan generated for one particular procedure has detected that has parameter sniffing, or using a hint, or maybe using the legacy cardinal estimator, or not using the parallel thread, etc., etc., etc. And it will again report you and give you the documentation on how you may fix it. Then you have SP Blitz Index, which it will give you very deep information about the indexes in either one particular table, a whole user database, right? All the tables in your user database, or all the databases in your instance. And it's not going to only tell you all the missing indexes, but it will also tell you the indexes that you are not using, right? Of course, it's collecting all this information based on the usage. So basically, since the last time that the server was executed, it started, right? If you have duplicate indexes, if you have for example, indexes in where columns are overlapping, right? All this kind of information that is really good to do troubleshooting and analysis. Another tool that it used to come with the first responder kit, and now is kind of discontinued. I believe you can still use it if you want, but it's not getting any improvement. Is that you can run even if you don't use this Power BI to render the output of what is captured, you can even put all this tool that I just mentioned in a SQL shop, right, and collect and send the output to user tables. There is a documentation which will explain you exactly how to do it. It's quite easily, right? So you're gonna save all this information and you're gonna keep it over time. And with this Power BI, you have this kind of graphical representation of what is going on right? So again, it's not in the latest version that were released, but definitely I believe that you can find it. Then we have from the SQL Server Tiger team what they call the BP check. BP check stands for best practice checker, right? And basically what this script does is, run through your whole instance and compare it with the best practices, against the best practices actually, and will give you that report and will tell you, hey, here you are not following the best practices in memory configuration, 10 dB configuration, max DOP, all the best practices, right? And with that, you're going to be able to take the corrective actions to make it compatible, or to follow the best practices. Then we have these ones that are the SQL Server diagnostic query from Glensberry, right? These are a set of scripts. Basically, each, let's go to this slide so we can see it. There is one set of script per SQL Server version, right? So since 2005 till 2019. Also versions for Azure SQL Managed Instance and Azure SQL Database, right? So depending on the version that you use, you have to download and use that in particular, right? And again, what it does is just go through all your instance, all your user databases, all the configuration, and will tell you exactly what you have, and will provide you with messages like warnings, maybe if there is something misconfigured that you may have to take a look. It's important to mention that all these tools that we've been covering in this presentation, they will only present you with the problem, and some of them also giving you help to troubleshoot it and to fix it. But it's not fixing them automatically, right? You have to follow the documentation to make the proper fix. This one from Glensberry, this is an example of the output, right, where we can see information about our instance, our host, how it's configured, a particular user database, etc., etc. There are like more than 50 queries that will do all this analysis through your instance, and the documentation will explain you exactly what are the purpose of each of these subquery. And then something that definitely I use and I love a lot. This is PowerShell and DBA tools. And to be honest with you, this is one of the tools that I find myself using quite often these days. Basically, if you have to maintain and administer and do troubleshooting and collect stats or anything that you want, not to one SQL Server, not to 2, 5, 10, if you have a big set of SQL Server instances distributed around the country, around the world, right? With PowerShell and DBA tools, right, you can automate a ton of things, right? For example, if you need to go and collect certain type of information from all the instances, right, with SQL Server, again, if you have 1, 2, 3 servers, it's not complicated, but if you have multiple, definitely it will be. Here with 2, 3, 5 lines of code, right, you can go to a list of SQL servers and go and collect or push something, right? Here there are some of the categories in where you will find tools or any script, let's say, to use. For example, categories. You have availability groups. You have replication. So you can go and query how your availability groups are in 100 instances at the same time and get the result in one only result set, right? And then of course you can store it into a user table and do whatever you consider that you have to do with that information. For example, you can go to multiple instances and check when was the last full backup completed successfully, when was the last time that the DBCC checkDB was executed successfully. Get your snapshot of your SP configure so you can check exactly how the instances are configured. Check the TempDB configuration, how it is configured, if it is properly configured or not, and many other categories. And again, it's extremely simple, right? And easy to install and easy to use. So as a DBA, I find myself using more PowerShell today than maybe Management Studio, right, for this kind of automation. And then we have Azure Data Studio. Azure Data Studio is the new tool created by Microsoft, which is basically a multi-platform tool to connect to SQL Server, right, on-premise and Azure SQL, and also other database engine, like for example Postgres. You can use it to connect, do development, etc. It's not a replacement of Management Studio. It runs side by side. Again, one of the most important things is that it's multi-platform, right? Another thing that is really huge is this concept of Jupyter notebooks, right? In where you can have in one single document a combination of markup text, scripting languages, in where you can combine multiple scripting languages like T-SQL, right, to run your queries, PowerShell, Python, Scala, R. You can even put some screenshots and save it there. And what is really important is that when you run those queries, right, let's say that you are running SQL Server, for example, you get the output and then you save the file. And when you let's say you get the file and you send it to somebody else, right, we're gonna get also the results, right? So this way you don't even have to be connected to the server to see the expected results, right? And you can also compare what is coming from the original file versus the ones that you are getting, and with that you can do that comparison. Then in terms of maintenance, there are these SQL maintenance plans which are good, but definitely the solution that is the most popular for sure and most probably the most used is the one from Ola Hallengren, right? If you need to handle backups, integrity checks, index and statistic maintenance, definitely this is the way to go, right? You have a set of scripts that you can easily install and configure based on your needs, and with that you will cover the whole maintenance, right? As I said, backups, integrity checks, index and statistic maintenance, right? Extremely important to have your SQL Server up and running properly, securely, and in a good shape. Also, if you want to do, for example, index maintenance, you have this tool called SQL Index Manager that is a graphical user interface that you can connect to one instance. You specify one or more databases and it will go through all the indexes and it will present you with the index fragmentation. Right? And with that you can choose what you're gonna do, right? Rebuild, update the statistic, reorganize, etc. You can run the maintenance directly from the application, or you can generate the script, right, the T-SQL script, to run it later, or maybe put it into a SQL shop, right? Let's go back to the demo machine. Okay, so I have here SP who's active, right? So we can run it, and right now, there is this. This is a virtual machine in Azure, so I have the backups configured. So right now, the backups are running. But let's go and launch again this script that basically generates random workload, right? And let's see what's happened. When we run it here, we see not yet. We only see the backup for now. Here, right, we see the select statement, and here we have, all the information related to the session. I'm gonna keep running it here. See at the bottom, we have the session ID, when the session was started, the login name, the weight involved, in this case async network IO, CPU usage, 10 dB allocation, if it is involved in a deadlock, number of reads, number of writes, what else? The status, we see if it is an open transaction or not, from which machine it's been executed, against which user database it is executed, the program name, in this case stress, the start time and the login time, etc. If we go and hit through this column, we're going to see exactly the statement that is being executed in this moment. So, and see here, I just run it, and right away I get the result, right? So here we see the wait, we see for how long it's been waiting, right, in milliseconds in this case. So definitely this is something that we run and we get this picture. Right now there are no logs involved, right? If we want to get additional help, we just run it with the option help 1, and we may get all the parameters that will help us to tune and maybe modify the output if we want to. Then we have the version that I create, which was SP currently executing, which is quite similar, right? Again, the only difference is that if eventually it finds a log, it's gonna put an additional result set just with the sessions that are involved in the log. I also have at the database level the percentage of the transaction log usage, and with that, I can check if the transaction log usage is too high or not. All right, so then I will switch to first responder kit, right? So, and I will run it to get something quickly, the SP Blitz with the option check server info and don't check a user object. So this way I can get the output quite quickly, right? And if I specify the parameters output, database, schema, and table, it will store the output of this into this particular user table, and we can analyze it later. See here we have this concept of priority, right? If the priority is 1, 10, something, with definitely those are things that we have to take care quickly, right? As soon as possible, and maybe if there are over 200, we can don't pay a lot of attention, at least right now. The goal here is to come up with this report empty, right, with no rows. So this way we know that we are following all the recommendations. Yeah? For example, here we have databases in full recovery model with no backups, right? The last known good DVCC checkDB is over 2 weeks. It's saying that the SQL Server has started in the last in last 24 hours. So this one was started a few hours earlier. Transaction log file is larger than the data file. What else? Many plans for one particular query, and let me make it a little bit bigger. Right, come on. So here we have all this, right? We can see, for example, instant file initialization not enabled, and we have here the documentation, the link in how to go there and fix it, right? And also we have additional information, right? We see that there are trade flags enabled, remote dedicated administration connection is disabled, system database is on the C drive, right? So definitely something that it's compared against the best practices, and you get this output. Then we have the SP bleed first, basically the one that will tell you why the SQL Server is running slow in this particular moment. So we have here all the output related to high CPU usage, right? Then there are high CPU usage which is not related to SQL, and we have a lot of wait types, right? And again, documentation on how to fix all those problems. Then let's switch to the possibility of seeing this output through the Power BI, right? So I'm collecting the output of all the scripts coming from responder kit, right, and saving the output into a file. So then I just can go here and dig through the Power BI. Eventually you can even publish it. Okay, then let's switch for a minute to Azure Data Studio, right? In Azure Data Studio, here I have the notebook version of the Glansberry diagnostic queries, right? For, in this case, SQL Server 2019. So what I'm gonna do here is, let me close this bottom part. We don't need it right now, right? So here we have, you see all the markup text with links, with the information, documentation about the script, right? And here we have the option to run this particular code. We see the code and it's basically checking the server name, SQL Server version, etc. So we hit here and it's gonna ask us to which connection we would like to run it against. So I will put my local instance, right? It's gonna take a second, and then it will allow me to run this query against my instance. So let me close this one. We don't need it anymore, right? Well, something is happening. We may go back here in a minute. Let's switch to PowerShell and DBA tools, right? Here I will go to this one in particular, which I like a lot, and it's also using the concept of Glansberry's diagnostic queries, right? So what I'm gonna do here is set certain connectivity information, like the SA password, the names, etc. So I'm gonna run this, and then I have this line, right, which is invoke DBA diagnostic query. Is telling us which SQL server, the credential, and then we have this output called this parameter called selection helper, right? Let's see what that means. So I run the first part. I will run this, and something important to mention is that in this server variable we can specify multiple servers with in the string we separate it by commas, and we get a list of servers. So whatever we do here is going to be executed through multiple servers, not only one, right? So when we run this for the very first time, it's going to pop up with this selection helper, and basically these are all the section of the Glansberry diagnostic queries, right? So for example, I would like to see hardware info, right? So I go hit hardware info, I hit OK, and it's gonna get the output, right? If eventually I don't want to use the selection helper, and I know what the query name is, for example version info, right? I will run it, and I'm gonna get here that is SQL Server 2017, for example. If I want to check server properties, right, I will do the same from here, right? So I get all the server properties. Here in the demo is only for one server, but I can go through multiple servers and collect this really easy and quickly. Then, one that I like a lot is this one, which basically will allow us to, let me clean the screen. I will run it, the whole thing. Test DBA disk speed. It will tell us database file per database file, right? In this case, user and system databases, in which drive is located, the file name, and then it will give us a remark on read performance and write performance. So we have okay, very good, serious, IO bottleneck, slow, need attention, very good, etc, etc, etc. So with this we have like a overview of a particular, for all the log and data file for every single database in our server. So we can easily check what's going on in terms of IO. Then one that I use a lot, right, is that, let's say that, for example, you have one availability group, right? So you have your user databases synchronized, but you don't have your system object like login, SQL shops, alert, etc, etc, etc. With this one, right, you just do export DBA instance, you specify the server name, exclude databases. In this case, I don't want to do much with user databases, and then I specify a path, CDBA tools. I won't run it right now because it's going to take a second, several minutes, but if I go to CDBA tool, which I ran it earlier, right, we're going to see that it creates a folder with the instance name and a timestamp, and it will create with a set of T-SQL script that will have all the configuration from that particular instance. SP configure values, DB mail configuration, the logins, the SQL Server agent shops, etc, etc, etc. And we can apply it to a destination server, or we can even save it for ourselves. Well, here finally the Azure Data Studio came back. I ran this. It came the result. So I ran the query number 1. Then I can go deeper and run another. Well, it's not working very well. But you got the point. We have the notebook here, and we can run it. We can even run all the cells, right, in one shot, one by one, of course. Or then if we want, we just go there and hit it manually. So let's go back to the presentation. All right, then we have SQLWatch.io, right, which is a complete set of tools. This is an open source project which allow you to capture information from one or more servers and store it into a user database, and then based on Power BI dashboard we can just go there and represent the output in a graphical way. Quite interesting to use, right? So then I just briefly mentioned Redgate SQL Monitor, which is another option that you can use. This one is not free, it's paid, but it's another option that you may have. And also there is an open source version called Telegraph, InfluxDB, Grafana. Is a combination of different techniques and solutions, open source, that which allow you to do this kind of things, just to monitoring purposes and get weights, memory usage, SQL activity, etc, etc, etc. Here you have the links if you want. Finally, here I have the references to all the solutions that we've been discussing during the presentation. Here again, my contact information. Don't doubt to reach me if you have any question about this presentation, or if you want to connect with me. So thank you so much for attending. I hope you have a great day and enjoy the Data Platform Summit. Bye.